Good afternoon, everybody. Counting down the days to Thanksgiving break. Yeah, I'm already dragging. Our teacher's already canceling classes. If only I had gotten through more stuff last week, I could feel better about canceling classes. Well, I guess people aren't, nobody's going to remember React Admin at this point in a week and a half anyway. So, yeah, it's whatever. Most of your classes tomorrow are canceled. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll try and get us out of here quick today, unless things just don't make any sense. But for the most part, we're just kind of like reading documentation. And the trickiest part, I'm kind of just going to show you guys how to do some of it. And then the rest of it's just kind of like, hey, go Google this and read the documentation because, we're at that point in our web development careers, right? Implying I can read. Clemson tries to make well-rounded students. I just try and piggyback on that, or at least make you feel bad for not being a well-rounded student. All right. Slack is turned into Craig Overflow. Yeah, uh-huh. I may or may not be available on Slack for the rest of the week. I'm going to do, what the CDC recommends against and go visit my family for Thanksgiving. Yeah. But I'm trying to go get a COVID test tomorrow just to make sure, not like I'm worried, but I don't know about y'all, but my parents are old. Don't tell them I said that. All right. So we're trying to set up React Admin. So I think we did some of this the other day, but I'm going to delete it and start over with that React container we made. So I'm just going to sudo rm-rf star, which is the best command ever, except when you screw it up and put like /star, that's happened before. Yeah, do it in root. Yeah, seen that. Seen people do that accidentally. It was like on a production web server at Clemson, no less. It was great. It was actually a script that didn't get a path variable set and then was just like rmrf path /star. And since the path wasn't set, it was just like /star. Yeah. It's bad when you're rmrf/star.pdf. Oh, yeah, that's not good. Yeah, you've done something bad when like halfway through your RMRF, it just like SSH hangs up on you, or like the RM executable deletes itself and then can't do anything else or whatever, and you're like, oh shit. I hope we got a backup, guys. But hey, never trust a backup unless you've tested it. No backups exist until they've been executed. So I got this cool Docker run command, and I can run it and drop into bin bash, and I'm mounting up the project 6 app into the app directory. So this directory here is the same as this directory here. And since the first thing in React admin tutorial is to run create React app, I'm going to try that. But I don't need to do it from this folder. I need to do it from the home folder or the root folder. Create React app. And I just did this a couple of seconds ago, and it didn't work. And it didn't work because Create React App apparently over the weekend changed how it does stuff. So they say we no longer support global installation of Create React App. So you should uninstall it and run it a different way. So I'm going to have to go into the project description and say don't install Create React App. npm-g on or npm uninstall -g create React app, and it's gone. Sort of. And then instead we're supposed to run npx, which I think is like just download it and execute it, but don't install it. Create React app. And so now it's getting create React app stuff, and then it's executing create React app stuff, and then it's installing all the right stuff. Hey, you know, I found out about this today too, all right? I didn't want today's class to be complicated any more than you all did. I had, like, have you ever, I guess this is probably like more, you guys probably understand this better than I do because like meetings are a lot like classes, but have you ever just wanted to like meetings are easy and all that, but then you have an entire day of meetings and it's just a slog and you're like, can I just go do real work? Like, I know meetings are an excuse to be like, I didn't get any work done today because I had meetings, but like, I would much rather just not have meetings and actually get work done because this is so freaking painful. Oh my God. We had an hour-long sprint plan that went for an hour and a half because people were just like, well, let's dig into the weeds of exactly how we think we should solve this. And after like 30 minutes, I just didn't have the heart to stop people from going down into rabbit holes anymore. I'm just like, whatever. Just, I don't care anymore. Yeah, bad agile practices. Yep. It's true. Come on. Yeah, I would love to actually, you know, sometimes real world gets in the way of agile. Yeah. Yeah. But apparently statistically speaking, people should be doing grooming for like, if you have a 2-week sprint, you should be doing grooming for like 4 hours and sprint planning for 2 hours, and we do like half of that on both. So and we can barely stand it as it is. So yeah, I don't know. We're not doing too bad, but it's still pretty painful. Okay, so I can exit out of this. I have the app directories now installed. I can be like vim package.json. Actually, no, wait. I need to go back into it. All right, so now I'm in this app folder, and I got a package.json, all that, and I need to do, if we go over here, and look at this, it says we do create React app, and then we cd into it, where test admin here is what we're just calling app. And then we do yarn add all this crap. So let's yarn add all that crap. And while that's going, what is the next thing? So we will be using an API as a data source. They're using JSON placeholder, but we're going to actually be using our project 5. So yeah. Also, if I give you a project 5 code, make sure it works, because apparently I gave out some old versions of my project 5 code and not some new versions. And so a couple people are like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but it's not passing like 20 tests. And I'm like, I don't know, man, it passes 20 tests on my server. And then I like uploaded the code that I was giving out because I thought they were the same thing. And then turns out that the code I was giving out indeed did fail 20 tests. And I'm just like, I don't remember when or how I edited this, but at least I backed up the copy that I had on the server before I overwrote it. So pulled that copy down and gave that out. So just saying, you know, make sure you pass your tests. All right, so this says we need to, once it finishes doing its yarn add of all this stuff, and I'm going to skip this API as a data source because I'm going to drop into talking about that as soon as I get this stuff up and running. But this is the next part that we need to take care of. So we need to replace our app.js with this code. So whenever this is ready to finish, we can do that. Any questions while we wait for this? Okay, never mind. We aren't waiting anymore. Too late. Source/app.js. And let's just delete. Okay, right. Sudo chown-r ubuntu start. Now I can edit it. Let's just delete all of this and copy all of this instead. That didn't quite work, but okay. There we go. Import that, import React admin, import JSON server provider from our data JSON server. And yeah, that's almost all we need, but I'm going to go ahead and change it over to the project 5 code, which, let me look at my notes. Fortunately, I don't have those pulled up on screen right now. Okay. So we're just going to point it at /project5 instead. We don't need a host because it just knows, you know, host relative, but since we're starting with the /, it's path absolute, but host relative, you know? Okay, so this should work. And I'm going to start up a new one over here. And I'm going to do another Docker run, but this time, yeah, yarn start. Except we need to be the other folder. We need to be project6/app into app, and then React yarn start. And we're doing 3003 to 3000, so we should be able to see this if Nginx is running. Let's just make sure project 5 is running. Sudo service project 5 server status. Stopped. Start it. Okay. So now that's running. Cool. And what else do we need to do? Sudo service Nginx status. And that's running. Okay. So starting the development server. It's building. What's my IP address again? This. Okay. I'm just going to copy that real quick. And it's up. All right. So if I go over to the right browser and then the browser over here, I go to that /project6. We see that it says welcome to React admin. And if I refresh, everything looks good. Okay. So there's a couple of things we need to do first off to modify how this JSON thing is getting data from us. So where's my code? Let me make sure I'm doing this right. Where? Oh, crap. I think I deleted the stuff that I need to do this right. Did I put it in here? That's a good question. Okay. Let's go look at the project. Set app as the work dirt. No, Nope, we already got that. Public URL, environment variable public URL. All right, we already got that in our Docker file, so that was the other thing we had to do. So if you don't set your public URL to project 6, then React's not going to build right. It's not going to, it'll load this first thing here, this, whatever this thing. It'll load project 6, and it'll try and get everything else from the root directory instead of the project 6 directory, and it's going to fail. So you got to make sure you got your public URL environment variable set up in your Docker file, which builds the image with that environment variable. Okay.
Is that a Node.js variable, or is that just like a bash variable?
You set it as an environment variable in bash, and then Node.js picks up on it, or actually the Yarn web server that it runs when you do yarn start picks up on it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Which is really Node.js under the covers, but yes. Okay, so we got this thing running. Before we go back to the tutorial, nope, not that tutorial. Before we go back to this tutorial, this thing we've already changed, but there are a couple of differences, I suppose. Okay, first thing we need to do is we need to make sure this thing can authenticate to our server. So to do that, if we go and look up, oh, what do we need to look up? I think if we just go to, let's see if my Google foo is as good as I remember it being. What is the name of this thing? RA data JSON server. So if we look at this, we go look at the GitHub page. It should have a README. It does. These are all the things that it tries to do and how it tries to do them. So this one actually breaks in ours because it'll do multiple author IDs with an ampersand in between. We don't really want it to, like, this one works. We designed our API to work with that. And some of the other ones of these, I can't remember which, but my code remembers, and I still have the code. So we'll get to that in a minute. Hey, X total count, yeah. And we don't need access control headers because we're running off the same server, so blah. But if we go all the way down to the bottom, the most common usage of custom headers is for authentication. Fetch.json has built-in support for the authorization token headers. So what they're saying here is we make our own HTTP client, and when we make this JSON REST server, we give it the URL, and then we can optionally give it the HTTP client that we want it to use to flow all of its requests through. So if we go back and look at our code over here, switch back to this, cd source, vim app, JS. Okay, so we got this project 5 thing, and we just need to add an HTTP client to it. So eventually we need a variable called, it doesn't have to be called HTTP client, but why deviate from the tutorial and the docs, really? I mean, come on. And so let me see, yeah, this one. So I'm just gonna do escape, set, paste, because I don't want to screw up my indentation, and paste this in. So this is only mildly different from the code they have at the bottom of their page. If you look at the code they have, they just set a token to whatever the token is supposed to be, and everything else is about the same. And if we look at my code that I just pasted in, I just changed the token to basic plus B2A, which is base 64 in code of teacher plus testing, right? This will set up our basic auth headers, which will get us through the app.use part in project 5. And then we're pretty much good to go. So I think we can start now developing a resource. So one thing that this is missing, by the way, is we're using fetch utils here. We haven't imported fetch utils. And if we go over there and look at the code that we pulled it from, which is here, they're importing multiple things. They're importing resource, which we're going to use in a minute. They're importing admin, which we already have, and they're importing fetch utils, which is what this thing uses under the covers. All the rest of this stuff is just either passed in, or we set a new header or whatever. Now, to be clear, this isn't what we pasted in. This is what we pasted in. But, but this replaces this, and we still have to make all of this stuff and all of this stuff look the same. So let's go back over here. So up here we need, where's my cursor? There we go. So we need fetch utils, and we need admin, and we need resource with a comma, because eventually we're gonna need the resource, but not right now. Okay, so we have our HTTP client, takes in a URL, takes in some options, adds this to the options, and then sends it out the door as fetch utils. So that we're just modifying the options we get passed in. We're just passing the URL straight through. And that's how we're kind of, whatever's the inverse of encapsulation. We're like, hey, don't use the basic HTTP client, use this encapsulated HTTP client. So it's like we're putting our code in between the two layers, between the JSON server provider and the fetch utils that it's supposed to use. Excapsulation, really? Is that it? Or are you just making stuff up, Max? Okay. So this is like the cream filling in an Oreo version of capsulation, right? It's not, we're not wrapping the JSON service provider, and we're not like dropping everything out from underneath it. We're just saying, all right, yeah, you're going to eventually call fetch utils, but you're going to call my thing, which calls fetch utils. Okay, so this should work, and I'm not really even going to test it yet. I'm just going to go ahead and add a resource, because without a resource, it's, I mean, we may get a compile time error if we didn't have fetch utils, but like using the JSON server provider without a resource doesn't really do anything. So normally if you have a multi-line return statement, so remember this doesn't have any curly braces around it, this app, right? This thing right here, it's a fat arrow notation function, doesn't have any curly braces, so all of this just gets returned. If you want a multi-line return statement, you would be wise to wrap it in parentheses. So now that we're actually putting stuff inside the admin, we can't just close it on the first line. We actually have to close it down here. And we need a resource. And what goes into this resource? Now we can go back and look at the original tutorial, which is up here. Okay. So they've added a list guesser. We don't really care about that. We're going to add our own list thing here, but general thing is the same. Oh, my throat is so scratchy today. Good thing I'm getting a COVID test. Okay. Resource, and we need a name for this resource, and then we can define things like the list view, the show view, the edit view, the create view. There is no delete view, because you could click a delete button and it asks if you want to do it or not, and then that's it. So there's no like components that need to be rendered when you delete, but you have list, edit, show, and create. So back over here, and we're going to define those in another file, but we need to at least wire it up here first. Resource. All right. So we got a student list, which we haven't defined yet. We have to import student list up at the top. And if you're importing from a file instead of from a package, you have to do // or some other // or / like some folder / or whatever. But since the students file, we just want it to be right next to the app.js file, .js. So this is going to look for a student list export from the student's file, and then we're going to tell it down here, hey, I want you to use that as your list component. Close that, and this will, yep, this will error as expected. So if we go back over here, we're going to have to define that crap, which they're using list guesser, which they're pulling from, I guess, like a helper thing from React admin. But here's where we create our own list. So we're going to do something like this. It's not going to be exactly like this because we don't have all these fields. But this is basically saying, hey, user list, which ours is going to be called student list. It's going to take in whatever React properties we want. It's going to create a React admin list. And inside that list is going to be a data grid. When you click on a row in this data grid, it's going to take you to the edit field or the edit view. And then here's all of the columns. And they can be text, they can be numbers, they can be email. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different components. And if you want to know where all those components are, you can go up to the React admin documentation at the top. And let me get back to where I was. Okay, so the documentation here, if I want to go to list view, we can just read all about the stuff that we can do with the list view, all these different components and stuff. Just, you know, have a fun time. But we don't really need to do that here because we kind of know that, like, what are the things in students? Like, if you're looking at a student, it's kind of just name and ID, right? Is there any other fields in student that we care about? Don't think so. And it should be fine for name and ID to just be text fields, right? Like, we don't need to render them as numbers. We don't need to, like, render them as colors or email addresses or anything. They just need to be text, right? So that should be pretty easy. So let's go back over here and let's go to vim students.js. And we're going to have to import some stuff. As always, we have to import React in everything we do. And then we also need all of the stuff that React admin gives us. We don't need all of the stuff from the tutorial, but we need at least the data grid, text field, and list. And a lot of times this stuff for me, imports just start getting unwieldy after about 4 items. Like when we start messing with the edit views and stuff like that, it's going to get kind of long. So I kind of like to do it like that. And by the way, in the latest versions of JavaScript, you can have commas at the end of one of these list thingies. So you don't have to worry about, like, oh, I forgot a comma because I copied the last line to add a new line. And so the second to last line no longer had a comma. Just always put a comma at the end of your list, please. Because it's, yeah, it gets kind of, I've done that too many times where you're just like, why is it error? Oh, God, stupid mistake, cost me like 10 minutes. Okay, so now, so there's 2 different ways to export, and I think I've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it again. There's export default, and then, you know, my function or my component or whatever. Remember, it always needs to be capitalized if it's a component. So if we did it that way, then we would not have these curly braces and we could only pull one thing out of it. So if we did export default, we can only export one thing. And when it gets imported later, it gets imported as whatever we name it, because it's kind of implied like this thing is only exporting one thing, so we can name it whatever the hell we want. Kind of like, let me close out of this for a second and go back into app. Kind of like how this one is. This one is export default. We didn't have to wrap it with curly braces. There's only one thing coming out of it. And we can really name this whatever we want. We can call it JSP or whatever we need to, because it doesn't, it's not lining up multiple things that come out of it to whatever names I give it. So we could call this one whatever we want. This one, if we wanted to call it something other than student list, we have to do even more like syntax. It's kind of a pain in the ass. So just, you know, since in our students, we want to export a whole bunch of stuff. We want to export the student list and the student view. We don't want to have all these different files. I mean, I know like Java, for example, loves to have like 500 files with one tiny little 5-line class in each one, but we don't really need to be doing that here. So we're going to say something like export const student list, and it's a function, so it's going to take in props. and it's going to return, and it's actually going to implied return. So we're going to use these things to just implied return a multi-line thing. And it's going to start with a list, just like in the docs, except this list needs to take in all the prompts we were given. So far, so good. And we may as well close that list. And inside here, there's a data grid, just like we see in the docs, with a lowercase g, just to make sure. And inside data grid, we want something like, what is it? On row click or something like that. I think we want to leave this one the same. Is that what I said in the project stuff? Export foreign named function student list, which returns a rack. Yep. And it doesn't really, I guess I didn't really say what it needs to do here, so we're just going to leave it as data grid. Okay. And inside here, the documentation, this React admin tutorial that we're following says we can now put our text fields in. The cool thing is we really don't have to do much here. Text field source. So U or CE equals ID, and text field source equals name. So the nice thing about React admin is at this point, you're rendering each row in a table. And the data grid and the list components that you're wrapping these things in are nice enough to already be for looping through all of the items you've gotten back from the server. So when you say source is ID, it's like, all right, so for each item, find a key that's ID and find its value, and that's the value inside this text field. Easy peasy. If we wanted to give it a different name, like my super cool ID, we could actually put like name in here or label or something like that, and we could actually put different column headers for each of these. But React admin, I believe, is smart enough to do. So if we do that, did it build already? Yeah, because we aren't getting any errors anymore, right? Okay, so let's go see if it screwed anything up. Refresh that, and we got students. Bam. So we got an ID of C. Baker, we got a name of Craig Baker, and it's even smart enough to be like, hey, your source was ID and you didn't give us a name, so I'm just going to take the like key name that you gave me that was like lowercase name. I'm going to put a capital N on there. I'm just going to be nice and, capitalize it for you. Just, don't worry about it. So if I wanted to add more students, they would all show up here. We can set rows per page. We can export all these cool things. And if I click on it, it doesn't do anything because the system knows that I haven't set anything else up on it. Like there is no show view yet, so it can't really do anything. So from this point on, I'm sure you all can figure out what else students needs to export besides student.list. You need to have like a student create and student edit and student show, and you need to import each of those in the app.js. So you need more of these, right? And then in app.js, you need to make sure you pull them all in here, and you need to make sure that you define them all here. So list is student list, and then you would have something like show student with a capital S, student show. And if you imported it here and exported it over there correctly, that's all you kind of need to do. When you get to grades, you just have another resource that's called grades, and you import from a grades.js, and you just start plugging them in here. All that makes sense. I'm sure you all can figure the rest of that out, or at least wait till like next Wednesday to ask questions, because we're all wonderful people. So I'm going to move on to the only other confusing thing that, like, it used to take a lot of research. Now it takes less research. The easiest way, if you were to do it by hand, is to go read some source code. I'm not going to make you all do that, but I'm going to make you watch me do that. So there are a few things, if we filled all of this stuff out, that are not going to work correctly. I'm going to skip over how I know this because, I mean, basically I wrote this and went, oh, shit, that doesn't work right. So when it's talking to our API, let me see which two they were. Hold on one second. Okay, so actually there's that list component that I wanted you guys to make, but that's actually going to be pretty easy. And we can talk about that on Monday if you guys haven't figured it out yet. Okay, so the get one resource and the get many resource, those two things, if we go look at, where is this? All right, so this one, it does what we want, but we're going to add some extra functionality to it. And this one just does not work with our API, so we have to change it around. To know what we want it to do, all right, so first we can do this one first because I haven't talked about the list component that we need to change get one to, we have to change get one to make it work with the list component, but the get many reference, it's pretty easy. If we have multiple things on a page, like in our student view, oh wait, that's right, hold on, where's the project? Student list. Oh, this one. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the grades list because that'll at least show this reference field problem that I'm talking about. All right, so let's go back over here and I'll do this real quick. So import grades list from /G grades .js, and then down here I'm going to do another resource. Student list or student? Yeah, okay. So student list. So grade list probably would be correct. You can call it whatever you want as long as you import and export it correctly. Oh, I did grades create and student. Okay, so I did it plural in the documentation for the course. So I suppose it should be plural here. I have to go fix some of this crap. I'm just trying to do this so that it makes sense for you guys. List. Okay. Slash that. And I have to go back into students. I have to make this students list. Okay, that wasn't the right key. There. And then vim grades.js. And where's my code? Because I'm not going to write this out. Grades. Yeah, let's just grab all that. Set paste. Insert. Did it not grab? Okay, so we got all this stuff. All right, so we have this list. So we have a data grid. And when we click on the row, it's going to edit. Students misspelled in the import for students list. Okay, I'll check on that in a second. So here we have a text field for the ID, just like normal, and I actually named it capital ID because otherwise it only capitalized the first letter. I wanted it to look nice. We have a text field for the type, which is like quiz or test or whatever. We have number fields for the current grade you got and the max grade that was available. Those are numbers, so it makes sense to make them a number field. And then we have this reference field. So instead of displaying student underscore ID as like C Baker, when I'm looking at the grades table, I want to see the student's name. So even though in the record in the database, we say, hey, this grade is for C Baker, in the table itself, I want it to say, hey, this grade is for Craig Baker. And for that to happen, we have to say, hey, this is a reference. We're referencing the student's resource. We're using the student ID on the grades object. And so the student ID on the grades object is the ID in the student's reference. So it's a little confusing. React admin knows what to do with this. You're just like, all right, I want you to go look at that other resource we defined called students. I want you to find the student with the ID that matches what's in this source here, this key here. And out of that record, I want you to pull the name. So far, so good. And I'm going to make sure, I think I need a second. I probably need a second name in here for this to actually be a problem, but go ahead and save that and then go back to students. Students, that's working right. If I go to app, yep, I did misspell that. STUDENTS, students list. Okay, so if all that's done, this grades list is not, okay. Grade list, yeah, okay. And all right, so it's saying, hey, you've defined all these things, you're not using them. That's all fine because I just copied the top half of my file. It does give you nice linting though. It's like, hey, I still built it, compiled it, everything's running fine, but just for future reference, here are some warnings from the linter that we automatically ran on your thing. I hope it doesn't cause you problems in your code later. Okay, bye. All right, so if we go back to our browser, go look at our React app, we have this one student, and I think I need to add a second student, but I don't have the create thing done yet. But if I go look at grades, it's probably, yeah, it broke. So if we go look at why it broke, and look at the console, it says this right here. Project 5/students, question mark ID equals C Baker, ampersand ID equals Craig B. Yeah, it's not gonna work too well. That our API is not made to handle that. Funnily enough, we can kind of just make our own JSON REST thing, which is part of what I describe up here. Where? This one, REST client. So if we go look at how this code works, if we go into the source over here, this is for the RA data JSON server, which is the thing we're using. It's in TypeScript, but TypeScript is just like JavaScript with a little bit of typing on top of it. We see here that it exports this one object. So it exports this one function. Basically, you need to export something like this that returns, right? We're wrapping it in parentheses, and it just returns a big object, that starts with a curly brace, ends with a curly brace. It's just key value pairs. But every key is like get list or get one or get many or whatever. And every value is the function it needs to call to get that stuff from your backend server. So the React admin's like, hey, whatever I'm using to talking to the backend server, whatever my data provider is, I need you to do a get list call for me and give me back the data. And so this just returns a promise, and that promise is eventually fulfilled with all the data. So the easiest thing for us to do is to just kind of this is actually encapsulation this time. So if we go over here, let me get this code right. Hold on 1 second. We're going to need to make our own REST client, and I'm just going to delete this real quick. Okay, all right, and copy this. So back over here, vim rest client.js, set, paste, insert, paste. Okay. So we have this here REST client, and I left out the get one and get reference because we're going to have to do those, but each one, so we have this base client, and kind of the same thing we did earlier, right? So this is totally encapsulation. We create the JSON server REST client here instead of in app.js. Since when we get called, we get the URL and the client. We pass the URL and the client into here, and we get a base client. We get this thing which does all of the things that it's normally supposed to do. So if we just had all these plus the get one and get reference, it's just like, all right, well, here's a function. Here's our get list function. It takes in resource and params, and it just returns whatever the base client get list does. Okay, you guys can't see my code. Sorry about that. Okay. Let me start over. So I left out the keys for get one and get reference because in my code I already have that stuff written and we're getting there. but this is just straight up encapsulation. We use our JSON server REST client here. We pass in whatever API URL we were given, whatever HTTP client we were given. If we weren't given one, it defaults to using fetchutils.json. This looks exactly like the top of this code, right? Like you can kind of just, except for the data provider part, because that's TypeScript. We don't need that. But yeah, this part is returning this stuff. So if we go back and look at it, this part's returning this stuff. And each one of these returns a promise. So we just have to return that same promise. So for get list, we take in a resource and params, just like REST client does. And we call our base client with resource and params. And we just return whatever it returns. Straight up encapsulation. This is just pass through. Nothing in React admin even knows this is happening. And we can do get one the same way. And get one also takes resource, RCs, params, base client dot get one, comma params, and that's it. So now we have everything except for get reference, I think was the one, or get mini. Which one did I cut out? Get mini. So the get mini call, if we go up here to our app, that's this one, get mini. And we know it's get mini because, how do we know that? Because we can see here in the call stack that it's actually calling get mini. Oop, okay, didn't mean to go that far. Okay, so we need to make our own get mini that does it the right way. So get mini, and we can use the get one code. So instead of actually sending out one request with multiple student IDs ampersanded together, we can do a promise.all over a bunch of requests, right? Which I'm sure you guys are fairly familiar with at this point. At least I hope you are. So where is it? Let's just drop this in here. So we got this code here. So when they call get mini, we're like, hey, this is what we're doing, just so that I can debug it and make sure it's working right. Yeah, okay. So loop through all the IDs we were given. Fairly straightforward. How do I know we were given IDs? Well, kind of because if we read their code, that's kind of what they're getting. They get a query with all these things. If I look at get mini, they have a query for ID and params.id, and that's kind of all it does. So kind of reverse engineering what their code does to encapsulate it. It's kind of just how you have to do encapsulation sometimes, but this is the end result. So if we do this, it's still not going to work right because I don't think I have the Craig B user in the database yet, but we have to wire that up now. So instead of don't need that. What did I call it? Okay, so we got this REST client. We're pulling it from our REST client.js down here. We instantiate our REST client instead. That was not the right thing to do. Let's just delete this whole line. Okay. And that should work. Mostly. I think it'll still error on this. Okay. Where's our code? And I'm probably going way too fast, but I just want to get y'all out here with at least some video that you can go back and watch later, you know? If we go look at grades, it still errors, but it errors because IDs blah and blah, and it gets a 404 not found on Craig B. That's because Craig B doesn't actually exist in our database because we delete Craig B in our Postman tests. So let me just do a quick Postman thing real quick. Yeah, that's the right one, I think. And if I go to project 5, student, post student, create Craig B, send. All right, now if I refresh, it kind of worked. What happened? Why didn't it work? Can I like hard refresh this? Okay, so it's not giving me the name right. And I can't remember why it's not giving me the name right, but at least it's returning something. What did I do wrong? What actual data did it get back? Request, response. Name, Craig Baker, that's what we want. This thing's called that. Why is it not working? I might just get back to you guys on that, because I don't know why this isn't working. All right, well, it's not working right. I'm gonna have to figure out why it's not working right. Hopefully they didn't like update some other code since I wrote this code myself, and I have to rewrite it all again later. But yeah, that's kind of, I don't know. I'm like kind of fried from all the meetings today, so I'm just like, if you can't really tell, you know. So I'm just gonna call it there, and if you guys have any like questions, hit me up on Slack or something, or ask now. Otherwise, go enjoy your Thanksgiving. Okay.
Sorry.
It's fine.
Or I can ask you in Slack.
That's fine. Go ahead.
So for the Nginx container, should it just work if you just install Nginx?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like 2 or 3 lines of code.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to add any like configuration stuff?
I don't think so. I don't remember why not. Let me look at my code real quick. Yeah, okay. Project 5. Nope, not 5. Project 6. Nginx. So mine really was just installing Nginx. It was like 2 lines.
Okay. Yeah, so, that's mine too. But I was just wondering if I needed to do anything else.
Oh, that's because we aren't doing any location proxies or anything in Nginx. We're literally just like, all right, take what's in var www.html and send it out port 80 or 8080 or whatever. And then Docker does the port mapping for you when you do Docker run. You're like, hey, map port 80 to port 3003 or whatever like that. And then your core, your Nginx on your actual operating system on your server does the location proxy port mapping.
Okay. Cool.
So you're either going to be running the yarn start when you're developing, and then when it's done and you do the build and all that stuff, then you just run React Nginx instead, and that just hosts those static files for you. But either way, both of those things are going to be routing through 3003, which your main Nginx is going to pick up on in proxy.
Okay, cool. All right. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Any other questions before I dip out? Thanks, y'all. Have a great day and week and Thanksgiving break. And I'll see you for one more week before we start on the finals. So get some rest. Also, maybe work on the project a little bit. I don't know. It's just whatever you need to do.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep. Y'all have a good one.
See y'all.